Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Green Talk, where we spotlight the voices transforming landscapes. I'm your host, Ms. Rain Mata, and today we are diving into something that it is overlooked but incredibly important: palm tree care. Now, I know what you may be thinking. What is there to say about palm trees? They're tall, iconic, and seem to just be there. But what if I told you that there is a real gap in how palms are cared for and that it is leading to major problems across communities, resorts, and cities across the world? To help us dig into this, I'm joined by Jeff Kaulbars, management partner at Ptolemy and GDR Solutions. Jeff brings years of experience in environmental solutions, and he is sounding the alarm on the outdated practices that are quietly damaging these beautiful giants. Jeff, welcome to the Green Talk, man. I'm excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. I love talking about this subject.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Well, let's start with a big picture question, Jeff. Why palm trees? Why focus so much attention on a plant that most people assume take care of itself?
That's a great question. And it came about 4 years ago. I've been in the landscape and tree industry for 3 decades in Florida. And it's normal to just, if a palm dies, you remove it and then you put a new one in. Not much is thought about the consequences of doing that. And I was having a conversation with my dad, and he takes care of, at the time, he was taking care of mainly residential palm tree health. And he was actually specializing in that. And having this conversation with him, and during that time, he really helped me appreciate the threats, that there's real threats to palm trees. And a lot of these threats are not curable and they spread. And it's almost like you have in a community, you'll have thousands of palms and they're quietly disappearing. After that conversation with him, it made me kind of rethink palm care and what I was doing. I'm a big why guy. Why is this? Why is that? I drove my dad crazy as a child. Over time, I just kind of started realizing, looking around, that these palms, they don't look well. And in talking with a few clients, I asked them if they'd be interested in some type of a plan, did some market research. And I started realizing that, this is an issue we're facing. And so it kind of just started from there 4 years ago.
Okay, great. And your experience and what you're seeing in the past 4 years or so, more specific, what are the biggest mistakes that you're seeing in the traditional palm care? What are the mistakes that people are making?
I think the biggest mistake is that we have this huge gap. So we have landscape contracts that normally go up to 12 to 14 feet. And those companies are focused on turf, shrubs, and irrigation. And then you have the tree services, they're focused more on trimming and removal. What's interesting too is when you dive deeper, you realize that these HOA budgets, that's how they're structured. That's leaving these palms, these iconic palms, out of the equation. And the problem with palms is, with palms, they're expensive, for one. And then the other thing is, managing them is very complicated, which we can get into some detail about that. But just briefly, you can have two symptoms and they both look very similar to each other, and they could be completely different things. They could be actually something that's killing the palm that has no cure, and it could just be a nutrient deficiency. It becomes very difficult. I was actually on a property last year with a well-known expert, and we were looking at this tree and thinking it had lethal bronzing, had all the symptoms, and we tested it, it came back negative. And then 9 months later, after some treatments, it looked good. So those are some of the complications that we can get into further, but it's really that big gap. And it's not the landscaper's fault. It's not the tree guy's fault. It's just what's been happening ever since I've been doing trees for 30 years, and no one's aware of it. And that's what I'm pushing hard. To get to this point has been very difficult, but I'm pushing hard to get a voice and help people see that there's a gap there that's not getting filled.
I imagine, I mean, being a landscaper myself, I can tell you, like what you're saying is 100% a true statement. There is a real gap. We focus so much on turf, plants, and, trees, and everyone, and I'm guilty. We think that palms will do fine just by themselves, and it is not. It is not. And talking about that gap in the industry, Jeff, maybe talking about more in detail, where is the disconnect happening? I mean, we talk about budget, and I may gonna add maybe lack of knowledge, but where are you seeing that disconnection?
I think it's multiple facets. One is, I'm actually working with developers to encourage them to put palm healthcare as a line item at the very beginning of the project. And there's a lot of complications that come. I mean, the first 90 days of that palm's transplanted life, and we kind of look at palms in our business as day one is when they're transplanted into a community. And they're living a great life typically in the nursery, and then they get planted in not the most ideal spots. And like just your comment alone is kind of what we see is they think, well, I don't know how they plant them up by you, but in our area, you have a big pool and they plant these big palms in there because they're instant impact. That's the great thing about palms. Instant impact. People want to see palms, but then they surround them with pavers. How are you supposed to treat that palm? How are you supposed to give it enough fertilizer? And so there's so many complications just even when it comes to the treatment of the palm. And then when the educational part, at ISA in Florida, the events that I go to, they're focused on trees, not on palms. And it's almost like we just breeze over palms because they are complicated. I believe that's why. It's like, well, they do fine. Yeah, but if you have 1,000 palms and you lose 30 or 40 of them, or like one community found this the hard way, they lost over $300,000 in palm trees. Why? And why is that happening? A lot of times people don't know. They just cut them down. And there's actually some things that we can do to protect them.
Exactly. And talking more about things we can do now going into the field on the practices, what about the trimming practices on our palm trees? I haven't seen people, trimming those palm trees, with leaving just very little fronds on it. And so, in your experience, what are some of the wrong practices and the right way to do it when become pruning or trimming a palm?
Definitely the standards is 9 and 3. That's the accepted practice. And I agree with that. There's a lot of reasons. Obviously, you'd like to leave as many fronds or leaves on the palm. If we get a chance, I'd like to talk about a guy from Brazil. Anyway, he mentioned to me about the fact that, and he likened to these leaves or the fronds on the palms like the solar panel. So every time you remove one frond, you're removing a large solar panel because those fronds feed that palm. And if they don't have the leaves, they're not feeding. And so the practice that I see that I would love to see stop is like in a pool area, because they're hanging it a little low, they'll trim the whole frond off. And so a palm that should minimum have 6 to 7 fronds, even 5 or 6, ends up having 3, where if they just snip the tip, maybe just snip a couple feet off the tip, that will elevate that frond up high enough that people can walk, because obviously that's an issue. So, and I think in our industry, it's gotten a lot better over the past decade when it comes to trimming too high. I don't know what it's like up there, but for the most part, I think the companies are doing well at trying to keep it 9 and 3. On the sables, you'll see them trim them a little higher than 9 and 3. But, when you're looking at palms at scale, and as we do, we have 50,000 trees marked in Florida. So we get a really good idea of what the palms are doing. And I'm not seeing that too many issues with sable palms, other than there is lethal bronzing, Ganoderma. But I think the guys are doing pretty good when it comes to that.
Okay, good. And so we talk about trimming. Now, what about preventive practices, either treatments or any other practices, horticulture speaking, that can be done to prevent any disease or any issue that we can prevent for a palm care?
This is what we recommend, especially on high value palms. It's not always practical, but would be great practice is on high value palms like, Canary Island dates, Majoles, Sylvesters, Bismarcks, things like that. A handsaw and clean it and disinfect it 100% before you go to the next palm. It's a lot of extra steps, but there's a lot of things that you can transfer to those high value palms. And I just attended this landscape inspector certification, and one of the guys in there, he mentioned something that was really interesting, that in California, they actually use a completely different handsaw. They throw it away, or I don't know what they do with it, but they don't reuse it between palms, because this is no joke. I mean, this is happening. When it comes to fusarium wilt or anything like that, and you're using a chainsaw, how are you really going to disinfect it between palms? There's a lot of education, and it's not all figured out. So, but if you really have some high value palms that you really want to protect, that's the best way.
Got it. Some, I will say, common mistake or something that I see a lot in the field is irrigation. So these palm trees are, let's say, on a median, on a highway or a boulevard with turf, shrubs, plants, maybe flower beds. And then we have rotors hitting the base of the trunk of the palm. Or if it is a lower palm, like a pindle palm, something like that, that rotor will be hitting the crown of the palm, creating fungi and diseases. What about irrigation? What's the best way to install or to water these palms?
Well, I think bubblers is the best way, but like you said, because we do palms on scale, those are the same issues that we face. And we're actually, this guy was telling me in Sarasota, he's under 25%, 75% water restrictions. So, the biggest issue with palms is making sure they get watered, especially when they're first established. After that, they can survive, and even some drought at times, they may start looking a little ragged, but you definitely would try to prevent any type of rotors hitting the trunk. That's or even mist heads. But I mean, how are you going to do that? Like in a median, it's hard. But if you're a residential client, right, and you have your own home, then any way that you can keep the water from hitting the trunk of the tree is ideal. And I don't know if this has any validity, because I really try to stick with facts, but some have mentioned that they've seen more Ganoderma around palms that are around mist heads, where it's hitting the trunk consistently. But I can't, that's not a fact. So it's just a thought. But I can tell you that definitely keeping water away from the trunk, hitting the trunk, in the canopy, 100% great idea.
So the less water, the best or better. Once the palm it is established,
Well, I wouldn't say the less water. I mean,
or the proper
the
proper
proper
proper.
watering. Yeah. I have a buddy that's in Brazil, and we talked about water with palms. And you got to think about too, and I try to keep this in mind, and I think this is a good valid point, is most of the research that's done on palm trees, it's not done in the urban environment. Okay. It's done on college campuses. It's not the same. And so
They have everything under control, pretty much.
a lot more control. And, now if it's your own residential house, you have a little bit more control. But we're talking about managing thousands of palms. But the amount of water he puts on his coconut palms, because he has a coconut farm, it would blow your mind. But he's producing 600 coconuts per tree. And the worldwide, I think it's 60 to 80, and he's getting 600 out of them. So you'll hear some people say, don't overwater palms. Well, I would consider what he's doing is overwatering, but he's thriving. His palms look amazing. So, but I think adequate watering, to give you the best answer, is just, it's really that first 90, 120 days is crucial. You don't want those roots to dry out.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what about nutrients? What about feeding, fertilizer? What kind of program, or how frequent a palm tree needs fertilizer or nutrients to survive on an environment that is not helping this a plant to improve or to succeed?
Again, that is something I'm still working on, but I can tell you this: the problem with landscaping is they fertilize enough fertilizer for the shrubs and the turf, and the fertilizer on the palms require more. The state of Florida recommends 1.5 pounds per 100 square feet of 8-12 or 8-0-12. So that gives you a guideline of at least, it needs more fertilizer. And what I've noticed, we're trying out a lot of different types of ways to fertilize these palms, is just fertilizing them with an 8-0-12 and doing it, every other month, every month. A little bit every month is good, or every couple months. We fertilize every 3 months because we do at scale, but we also do liquid and granular at the same time. And we're trying that out. We're getting good results. We went liquid for a while, and then now we're doing liquid and granular. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But I think the simplest thing someone can do is get a bag of a high quality bag, at least 50% release, with miners, and fertilize every other month.
And have you seen so far any difference between granular versus liquid? If you're doing liquid, you do drenching, you do root injection. What kind of practices you using with the liquid application?
It's a root injection, but it's a very short penetration. I need more data when it comes to that. And that's one of my goals, is to really hone in on studying what is the best, because the state of Florida, it recommends granular. Actually, kind of, I don't know if it's in their papers or not, but they're pushed granular.
I think it is.
So, but The liquid, it gets results. I mean, we've done tests where we just fertilize palms only with liquid, and it's pretty amazing. The problem with liquid is, if you get a rain and you have other issues with liquid, um, and there's not a lot of study. Again, they studied this stuff in a college campus in a pool where palm is surrounded by pavers. And we're looking at, I don't have it with me. I can grab it, but I have this port that I brought in from Brazil. We flew this guy in from Brazil, and talking about fertilizer, he has this permanent port that he puts in the palm, and he's designed a sugar-based fertilizer that he uses, and it's in an IV bag, kind of like an IV drip that could be used with palms that are in the pool. I mean, I could go on and on about all this stuff, but this port is wild because he designed this port because his family was losing coconut palms, and they have a coconut farm. And he was in his early 20s, and he was trying to help his dad. And they were trying all this trunk injection, a bunch of endotherapy. And so then he designed this port, and this port is in 3 million trees in Brazil, coconut palms. And, I'm trying to come up with a better option than what's being utilized right now. And, I don't know if they use that up there for palms, but a lot of use arbor jet, where they're putting a plug in the palm for OTC. Not a big fan. You're putting a hole in the palm. You do that for 10 years. If they don't come up with something else, you got 40 holes. I'm just not a big fan of it.
Making damage.
You're making a lot of damage, a lot of tissue damage. I've cut those palms down to dissect them, and I'm not throwing, I'm not saying, maybe I shouldn't have used their name, but I just think the practice of drilling too many holes in a palm is dangerous. This product, I was searching for the past couple years. I mean, I talk to people in Spain, Dubai regularly about palm trees. They have a injection called SOS palm in Spain, and it's about, I don't know, so long, and it's a small, like a straw, and it goes permanently into the palm. And they've found that they can use that for 6 to 7 years for red palmetto weevil. And so I was looking at using that for OTC and for insecticide, but this port is a lot bigger. It will last 5 or 6 years too. So there's a lot of exciting things, I think, that's going to be coming down the road with palm health.
Oh yeah, I bet. I mean, for me, everything you're just talking about now is new. I mean, most of the stuff, right? I know the basics of palm care, but yeah, definitely the industry is changing, and with technology and the more knowledge that people like you are bringing from other countries, other people that are doing it already, definitely is going to help us in the U.S. to, especially in the southern states, right, to take care of the palms in a better way. Do you talk about, you mentioned early a few times about little bronzing? I know it's becoming it's becoming a hot topic on Texas and Florida. Do you mind talking about a little bit about that? Like, what's little bronzing? Or there is already a treatment for it. I know. I mean, from my experience, 3 or 4 years ago, I was doing some research about it, and it was very, very minimum information I can get about little bronzing treatment.
Sure. The guy that he's also a great guy, Dr. Bader. He's really pushing for that. He's the one that identified the vector. He has a lethal bronzing class coming up at the end of May. So if you're hearing this and you're in Florida, or if you want to fly down here and go, it would be worth it. It's a 2-day, and it seems like, I haven't been to one of these 2 days with him, but it seems like he's really going to go into a lot of detail and try to help educate everyone. But with lethal bronzing, it attacks one of the top trees that it's affecting is sable palms, which is our state tree, and Sylvester palms. There's 21 other palms that it affects that are susceptible, and I think there could even be more than that. That's just what I have the data right now. And there's a lot of challenges with lethal bronzing, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. And it's a few of the things that make lethal bronzing complicated in an urban setting, especially on new developments. These palms can come in hot from the nursery. It happens, and that can spread it. And the issue with lethal bronzing is you won't know and see symptoms for 3 to 5 months. Even when you see symptoms, I think I sent you those slides. I don't know if you looked at them, but you can see those symptoms can look like lethal bronzing, and it's not. And then you'll look at a tree and you would swear it doesn't have lethal bronzing, but it does. We have just, it's amazing. It's amazing. This disease just blows me away. But getting back to the progression, basically what you're looking for is when the seeds start dropping, if they're falling off prematurely. Excuse me. And I'll tell you a tip that I've noticed that someone from Texas showed me is obviously you want to look for the lower fronds starting to brown out. And I've really noticed that the tips, they really do start dying from the tips. So if you can kind of look at that.
So from the outside, kind of this outside of the fronds coming into the palm, to the crown.
That's correct. It's tricky because I tell you, I just tested 3 trees on the other coast and only one came positive, and it wasn't even the one I thought was for sure. I like trying to guess and say, hey, you know what, I know, tell my wife. But as I get into,
Yeah, you were talking about how to identify starting from the lower fronds and then start from the tip, and then you were some on those lines.
Okay, yeah, there was a guy from Texas that we walked some properties together with, and if you kind of think you might have a palm that has lethal bronzing, I just take my heel, I wear boots, and I'll push it into the root base, around the base of the tree, and if it's soft and it's softening up, that's a good indication that it might be lethal bronzing as well. Now, what do you do about it? One other, if we get into it, I don't know, I could talk about this for hours, but a lot of these guys are injecting OTC, oxytetracycline, and it's not a cure, but it is the best prevention that they've studied, I would say, other than what Bader's been talking about with the imidacloprid. But the OTC really focuses on that phytoplasma, so you're really just putting that antibiotic in there. The challenge with OTC is if you inject with the palm with OTC, you're suppressing the symptoms of that palm. So let's say you just all of a sudden start injecting all these Sylvesters on a property and you haven't tested them and you don't know which ones have lethal bronzing or not. You're suppressing the symptoms, which is keeping that palm in that landscape because it's not dying and you don't know about it. So we don't do OTC injections unless we know it's a negative result on a palm. We choose to manage the palm focused on the vector and focus on the plant hopper. You can do that with, root drench with the imidacloprid, broadcast sprays, things like that. We do a lot of sticky traps to manage those. That's a good way to do it. If you do get a palm with lethal bronzing, we just came out with this new zone management strategy. And what I recommend, this is just me. This doesn't come from the state of Florida, even though they do talk about that. I recommend zoning off some area and then test every single palm that's possibly susceptible. And any one that comes about positive, remove it. And then watch those and then put sticky traps up, see how much your population is with plant hopper, because it's serious. It's a serious disease.
So once it is infected, the palm, you have to remove it.
100%.
100%. There is
that's
no.
what we do.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that was my understanding as well.
There's no cure. There's no cure that I know of. And I'm open. That's why I'm coming on. I'm going to really start trying to push my voice out there because I'm hoping to connect with people that care about these palms, that can teach me what they know, because it's complicated. This has taken me 4 years to even get to this point. We have a very complicated database that we use to manage these palms. We track all treatments. Our guys actually have a video camera on them that tracks their treatments, tracks what they're putting on the ground, making sure everything's done right. But when it comes to lethal bronzing, I'm open to, if I'm wrong about anything, please get a hold of me because I want to improve. And if I can help someone else with this, because this lethal bronzing it's a challenge because there's just not a lot of urban testing on it.
You're right. It's so new that, I think we are in the early stage of detecting and treatments and, how to prevent and, just discovering the problem at this moment that, you coming up with solutions and there is maybe other people out there trying to also fight this situation. And as you mentioned it, the more we talk about it, the more people will start raising their hand and say, hey, I'm doing this over here, because it is becoming more popular. Like I said earlier, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, I did some research about it, and I think it was just a couple articles, very general information, not specifics at all about this problem and how to treat it. I do remember about the solution is once it is infected, you have to remove it. And if it is palm trees, nearby, 2 or 3, take it away as well, because most likely they're going to be infected also.
Yeah, and you can test them, simple test. Now, there is a very good video I don't know if Dr. Bader's coming out with new information at the end of May or not, but he has an excellent video on YouTube that you can do. It's probably an hour long, and he goes into managing lethal bronzing and the complications of it. And it's a really good video.
And where is going to be this class that you talk about, seminar?
It's going to be in Davie, and I believe it's May. It's going to be at the University of Florida in Davie, I believe. And I'm thinking it's probably the 25th and 26th of May. And it's good information. We all need to learn. I've got a customer that we're about ready to do a test. They have probably, I think it's 160 or 180. I can't remember off the top of my head. Sylvesters and canaries. And we've been treating them for a little over a year. And we're about ready to test every single tree. And this will be my first test to see what kind of results are we getting from the management that we're doing on a large scale. I'm hoping to get some feedback that I can help share with Bader or anybody that wants to listen about it, because it's a big challenge. And we can't stop planting palm trees in Florida, right? So
People love them.
They love them.
Yeah.
You just can't. I mean, it would be ideal to put the palm in the right place and all that jazz, but it's not reality. I'm a big reality guy. And so why don't we try to figure out how to monitor them? We do a lot of monitoring, not just treatment. We do a lot of just visually inspecting every single palm every 3 months. And that helps.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, keep an eye on them, and keeping data records help for sure. So you talk about testing. What's the right process to test, or the steps to test a palm for lethal bronzing?
I mean, it's pretty simple. It's just a typical tissue test where you're drilling in to get a sample from the palm. And if you don't know how to do it, they have University of Florida has a bunch of information about that. And you're just taking a small tissue sample about the size of what you would carry, the old days, the little camera film. And I found on my LinkedIn, I put something on there that may be valuable to some, may not, but I just use little tacks to put my baggie up. First, you drill the hole. I just drill a small little hole so it cleans out the hole. Then I use a 1 gallon Ziploc bag because it seems to catch it better. I use thumbtacks right under, just very slightly into the pseudo bark, and then just draw your tissue out. And you take that and then send it off to the lab. Gainesville's super quick. So if you need a super fast, I mean, I think they even have rush delivery, but they're fast when it comes to lethal bronzing testing. And then Dr. Bader has a digital test, which is more sensitive.
So far, Florida, University of Florida is the only locations where people can send the tissue for testing?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's all I go,
Yeah.
Another thing you can do is, this is a huge thing, is Dr. Bader you can send the sticky traps. So we'll put sticky traps up in the canopy, leave them up for about 10 days, 14 days. If you pull those sticky traps down and put them in a baggie and send it to him, he'll actually look and see if any of the plant hoppers are testing positive for that phytoplasma.
Awesome.
So that's a nice, that's big.
It is. Yeah, it is. Well, that's some good information for sure. And besides lethal bronzing, Jeff, which is a huge thing, and we all learning this, there is any other disease, insect, any other common threat for palm trees that landscapers, property management should be aware of it?
You have palmetto weevil, and that is tough to spot. It's a tough one to spot. But if you watch like what my dad taught me and what other guys have told me, is learn to just stare at palms and find out what they look like normally, and just really just dial in and look at palms all day long, because it's the slightest little indication, especially like on a Bismarck, if the fronds start kind of sagging down, you can kind of see that, and that's an indication that maybe there's palmetto weevil. Palmetto weevil is tough to spot, but if you do spot it and you get it right away, you can actually just bud drench it and it'll come back. I have a photo that was in my slides that we treated it. We did a target response on it, and maybe 15 months later, it had a full canopy. Palmetto weevil. And that too is, if you start seeing the fronds kind of like in the meristem is all collapsing and falling down, that's a good indication of palmetto weevil too. And you can still treat it then, and there's a good chance it'll come back. Ganoderma, which most people know with the conch, really looking at that conch when you inspect the tree, really look around and see if you see any conchs. The other thing you want to spot is The way we do our testing or our visual inspections is we start at the base, just look around, look at work conch, look up and down the trunk, and you're looking for any type of sap, any kind of leakage. And if you have some pretty good leakage on some particular palms, then that could be Thealeviopsis, which is also, it's more of a trunk rot, so it will kill the palm. So any type of leakage like that. If the palm is being spiked though, which hopefully they're not, but if the palm is being spiked, that will produce leakage, but it's not something to necessarily worry about. So you got Thealeviopsis, Fusarium wilt is another one. And that you can see if you start losing the lower leaves and you start seeing a brown streak around the petiole in the middle, that is serious, and you should test for that. And you can do that with a tissue sample for Fusarium. Rachis blight is very similar to Fusarium. It's really looking for that petiole damage. If you start seeing some lines in the petiole, like heavier banded lines, there's so many threats. I'm trying to think, lightning, but that's more Mother Nature. But I'm trying to think of anything.
Humans.
And humans, yeah.
I think that's a bigger one.
It's really just looking at the palm. The best thing I could tell anybody is, let's say you just have a small property that you maintain, or you're a homeowner. Take your phone out, and when you fertilize it, take a picture of the canopy, take a picture of the trunk. Do it every time you fertilize, and try to do it at the same location. That's what we're working on right now, is the same area. But if you do that, then you have a record. In 3 months, now you have a built up 5 or 10 pictures of that palm. And if you don't know, an expert might be able to help you, at least put you in the right direction. And then you have timestamps. So,
and I will say, just adding to your comments, that also the same principle of planting the wrong plant on the wrong location applies to this.
Yeah.
Even, Florida is a sunshine state, South Carolina, Georgia, but with the weird weather patterns that we get in lately, where southern states getting snowstorms, ice storms, all this is affecting also these palm trees, Jeff. It could affect them, or palm trees really can survive through this changing environment, weather conditions, extreme weather conditions.
Yeah, when it comes to the cold, that's going to be their most difficult time. But the way I couldn't really talk on that too much, other than like our hurricane. We just had a hurricane come through here. I can't tell you about that. Is it did a lot of salt damage, and I think the reason this hurricane did more salt damage than others is because it really didn't rain a lot, and it didn't rain afterwards, and we had massive amount of salt damage everywhere. But the palms came back. And what I like to do is just help people appreciate is, these communities have been there for 20, some of them 20, 30 years. You're not going to go drive through a community and be like, man, there's no palms, right? There's still palms. They're adaptable. Some of them don't adapt as well as others, but a lot of them do adapt well. It just might be their brother or sister didn't adapt too well. Their genetics weren't that great, but you'd be surprised. And one thing I've learned is the soil conditions is so bad in the beginning with these palms put in a new development. And after about 10 years, you can see some of the palms that have not been able to adapt well, but most of them are starting to adapt better. And then by the year 20, that soil is actually healing, and it's getting very close to what it would like in nature. And so that's a positive. Like, I don't want to have people have a negative impact about planting palms, because I think they're amazing. It's just, we have to really take care of them. They're a living thing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's like everything else, right? We need to make sure we're doing the proper care for them. So we talk about issues and all these problems we're facing on the real life with the palm trees and the care for them. What about solutions? And your experience and your opinion, Jeff, what we can do different, landscapers, property management, what kind of approach we should have different to take care of these beautiful palms?
Well, like I said, I've been doing this 4 years now, and I think the best approach is to really look at doing a specific tailored program for palms, just like you do for the landscape contract. You have how many mowings you're going to get, how many fertilizings you're going to get. You have property walkthroughs that you're looking at turf. So when it comes to a palm health program, what you want to have in the palm health program is you want to have a base of fertilizing, whether it's every other month or every 3 months, some type of fertilizer program with a higher, with a slow release fertilizer, like an 8012. That's what Florida recommends. So baseline, just fertilize them. There's a friend of mine that sells a Palm Perfect, and it's an 8-2-13 or something. It's a good fertilizer. It's not. We're not supposed to use phosphorus here, but it's a great fertilizer. So something at that quality. If you look at his label, that's the kind of label you want. So, and then when it comes to prevention, so we look at it two ways. You have the prevention of diseases like lethal bronzing and palmetto weevil, and then you have the targeted response. And we focus prevention on higher value palms because they're expensive to replace, and a targeted response on the others. And then that's for pest control. And then the biggest thing I believe that you can do is just monitor the palms. If you're a landscape guy or you're a property manager, is go around and look at the palms on a scheduled basis. Go around, and if you see a palm that's not doing well, take a picture of it. Look at it in 2 weeks. If it doesn't look that much worse, you might be okay. But if it's a lot of, I don't even know how to train that. It's like, but I am coming up with something which I'm pretty excited about. There's no way of rating. There's no standard rating on how to rate the health of a palm tree. So I'm working on that to help maybe share that with others. Because really, what I think it comes down to is Dr. Kozer has an article about rating a palm tree's health assessment, and he focuses on the density, like the full is the canopy, and then looking at the percentage of green, how green it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you start measuring that, and maybe taking those two measurements and taking the worst one of the two. Because if a palm is starting to bring out new shoots that are deformed, there's something going on. So if you can rate a palm like poor, critical, fair, and normal, that's what I'm trying to get to. It's complicated. I'm trying to set it down in a short time frame, but I have a whole slide for that. And if anybody really wants to know, if you're a landscaper, you're struggling with something, I'm happy to help you. Or if you know anything about palms that I don't, please let me reach out.
Yeah, that's good. Let me tell you, I learned a lot from your slides. So they were very, very good ones. Yeah, very helpful. I will say I had my mini seminar myself when I went through those. Thank you for presenting. Very, very good.
Thank you.
So what is one of the pieces of advice, Jeff, that you can give to property managers, municipalities, landscapers that, dealing or maintaining palm trees? One advice to the people that most likely are going to listen to this podcast.
One advice, I guess number one would be fertilize with a high quality fertilizer. I believe that's baseline number one that's not being done regularly anywhere because it's expensive. So number one, that. Number two, we need a movement to start getting RFPs for palm healthcare. We need a movement to really bring attention to managing palms on scale. And I would love to see more done with the ISA in Florida when it comes to palm healthcare and training. I would love to have more training on that, on how to manage. But I'll tell you, if you're a landscaper and you're seeing some issues with your palms, look online. There's a lot of pictures that you can kind of dial in. You can use, I'm sure my name's on there, and I have a website, jeffkaulbars.com. You can go on there and send me a text, and I'm happy to connect with you and hey, you know what? I think it's this. But the thing with palms, too many experts are going to say that is it. But I'm going to tell you that
it is not
guaranteed. It may not be. And I might tell you something that might not be right. And I try to footnote everything with it. This is just a guess. It's your best guess. It's hard to test. You can't actually even test for things with palms, a lot of things. So you're just kind of guessing from experience. And I've had some really good mentors that's helped me. So I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah, 100%. I appreciate it. And I'm sure, you just say it, but I'm glad that you mentioned it, where people can find you. And so if I'm sure there will be people reaching out to you, because it is out there. It is real. Any landscapers, property managers are facing this issue. Sometimes the solution is just keep going and hope for the best. But it is a beautiful plan. It really beautifies the landscape of the communities and the cities and towns. So really eye-opening conversation, Jeff. I really appreciate it. You take the time to sit down with me and talk about it. You mentioned it. We can talk hours and hours about diseases and problems and etc. as well solutions. But I think we covered good points, and the more people start talking about it, I feel the more people will raise their hands and start sharing the knowledge and the experiences, and the more we share each other the knowledge, the best or the better for everyone. So do you want just to reinforce where people can find you or reach out to you if they want to get in contact with you just for issues or just maybe some help?
And one other thing I wanted to mention was that I was there 5 years ago, right? And it's taken me even 4 years to appreciate that there's a problem. And I think a lot of people are looking away and they're like, oh, this guy. But I really do believe there's an issue, and hopefully people will take it seriously. But you can find me at jeffkaulbars.com. That's JeffKaulbars. And it has my social media and my direct cell phone with you can connect right there and send me a text.
Awesome. Jeff, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope to see you soon.
Me too. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.